What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Auto Auction Rebuilds. Some of you have been wondering for a long time, whatever happened with monster transmissions? What happened to that 204R that was in the Monte Carlo SS for Power Tour? And I'm here to tell you, man, we finally have some answers. To be honest with you, I completely forgot about it. Like, I was so upset over the situation. I sold the Monte Carlo. Like, as soon as I got back from Power Tour, I put another torque converter in it, and the car still was stuck in like third gear. And then I had to replace the whole transmission and the torque converter yet again, and I was so aggravated and angry. I was angry over the whole situation. I just got rid of the car. I sold it. So if you're wondering what happened to the Monte Carlo SS, the 87 SS that we built, we had a submitting performance 383 stroker. It was like 480 horsepower, man. That was a beast of an engine. We had a fully built 204R transmission for Monster Transmissions for that car as well. Of course, we went through the cooling system. I mean, I built that car to be a contender. The Monte Carlo was my first ever full build, like the way I wanted it, built from scratch, man. And it let me down. And I was so disappointed over the whole situation that as soon as I got back from towing it, back from Power Tour, I sold it. Now, a lot of you got really upset that I let it go, and I don't even remember what I sold it for. I think I sold it for $20-ish thousand, somewhere between $20,000 and $22,000, I think is what I sold it for. And when I added up the numbers, how much I had into that car, it blew me away. Guys, I put over 30 G's into that car. $30,000 into a 1987 Monte Carlo SS to have it exactly the way I wanted it. So the 383 had a pretty mean cam. It was really aggressive cam, and you could hear it, man. That, oh my God, it was beautiful. We had the exhaust coming out underneath the rear quarters. It sounded so good. You could hear them taking turns chopping. You know what I mean? Each side of the exhaust, like chop, 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 chop. It was chef's kiss, man. Oh my God. We had sponsorships with Holley. They supplied us with that Black Heart exhaust. Oh my God, that exhaust sounded so mean. We really put a ton into that car and had a lot of sponsorships. You know, Smithing Performance sponsored a good chunk of that engine. And that was like a $7,800 motor, okay? And then Monster Transmissions sponsored the whole transmission, and that I think they said was like a $6,000 transmission. Incredible. Then we had wheels and tires that I put into it. Holley gave us a hell of a discount on the Black Heart exhaust and the headers and everything. I mean, we had a lot of sponsorships, guys, go into that car. And unfortunately, even though I shook it down because I knew this is my first real full build on the channel, taking a car apart from stock and rebuilding it exactly the way I wanted it with the components that I picked. We even had air conditioning. We had working AC. Everything in that car worked. Brakes completely gone through and redone. Paint, the stripe kit, literally everything on that car got redone. And the transmission failed on me as soon as I got to, I think it was Bowling Green, Kentucky. The car, here's the crazy thing. I knew building it, I knew going into it, you really ought to shake these cars down. So I got on it, man. Number one, I gave it the 500-mile break-in period that you're supposed to give it. I didn't want to damage anything, so I was very careful with it for the first 500 miles. After that, I really started getting into it. And gradually, I built up. I didn't just go out and launch the damn thing. I started just gradually giving it more and more throttle, building up and building up and building up until I felt comfortable with the car, until I got to know how the car was going to handle when you're really smashing on the gas and everything. Unfortunately, it was a one-wheel peel car, but whatever. We didn't have time to do a posi unit on the back. I learned the car. I got to know the car. And I felt very confident and comfortable with the car. I put at least 1,000, maybe 2,000 miles on that car before I ever left Oklahoma on Power Tour 2024. So, man, it was dialed in. I mean, any little thing that needed addressed, I had it addressed before we left. Power Tour time comes, Monkey Wrench Mike and I, we hit the road running, man. The car was phenomenal. It made it all the way to Bowling Green, Kentucky, getting decent fuel mileage too. We were getting like 14, 15 miles a gallon from a carbureted 383. And she liked to rev a little bit, on the highway 70, 75. She'd be around 3,000, 3,200 RPM. Now, with that said, we get to Bowling Green, Kentucky, not a problem, and car was perfect, and everybody loved it. We got attention at the hotels. People were coming up. They just wanted to see the car. You could hear that thing just sitting there, chop, 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 chop. It was beautiful. The Mako did the paint job, and the stripe came out beautiful. Everything about the car was just, you couldn't have asked for a more perfect build on a car than that. And then something happened. The second day, we leave from the hotel in Bowling Green, and we go and we check in for Power Tour. Not a problem. And then we hit the first venue in Power Tour. Not a problem. We park. Some of you subscribers showed up, looked at the car, we talked. Everything was great. And then we go back to the hotel, and again, everything's fine. Later that night, Monkey Wrench Mike and I were hungry, and there wasn't very much open. Plus, it was a great opportunity to do a smoky burnout, right? When you got a bunch of... Mike and I, boy, we went to go get something for... And I didn't film any of this, okay? We went to get something for dinner right across the street, and there's a bunch of people. By this time at night, everybody's drunk in the parking lot. It's fun. Power Tour is so much fun. I love it. I really love it, which is why I'm building another car, 57 Chevy over here for 2025, and a 66 Impala 427 for hopefully 2026. And I'm already working on the 2026 car before I'm even finished with the 2025 car. Priorities, man. So we do a big old burnout. I mean, we do a raging smoky burnout. Car was fine. Drove it, got food, came back. Perfect. We go to bed after eating. We get up the next morning to hit the venue. We start the car. You guess what happened? Yeah, nothing. Car did fine. We drove all the way till we had to get off the highway onto like a regular road. And when we came off that highway, the car never downshifted. I noticed it immediately. And I knew right then we've got a serious problem. And we had a torque lockup. So this was a 204R, and it had a 3,500 stall, maybe, I don't remember, 35. I think it was 3,000, 3,500 stall converter, and we had torque lockup on it. So Monster Transmissions sold me a kit that they sell for their transmissions to engage lockup. It's basically a toggle switch. If you leave it on and it senses pressure on third gear, once it engages third gear and the line pressure goes up, it will automatically engage torque lockup. Or if you want to kind of race around and you don't want lockup, you can flip the switch off and it will not have torque lockup at all. So it's kind of like your decision. If you want lockup, click the button, it'll automatically engage in third gear, and then when you hit the gas and it downshifts, it will then shut off torque lockup. It worked perfect. I was using that lockup when we got off the highway, and I noticed the trans never downshifted. It got stuck in like third gear. Now it's important to remember, I keep an eye on all my fluids, I keep an eye on temperatures, I'm sharp with this stuff. I'm very careful with this car. All right, I kept my eyes on the fluid color was great, the smell was fine. Everything about this build was perfect until we got off the highway that day. And then I'm not sure, from my perspective, what happened. I just know that I'm literally in the middle of Kentucky with a car that I cannot drive anymore. It barely would pull itself down the road. And I flipped off the torque lockup thinking it felt like it was stuck in lockup. That's what it seemed like. The car would die. If you had it in gear, it would literally die immediately when it tried to idle. It was like the torque converter was not deactivating. You know what I mean? It was like driving a manual transmission car, leaving it in gear, and coming to a stop without pushing in the clutch. That's what I'm trying to explain. It just, boom, it was dead. So to drive it, what you had to do is you had to be ready to go. Traffic's got to be clear. You got to start it up, and you got to roll, man. Like you gotta go. And then as soon as you go to come to a stop, well, you better put it in neutral and kill it, because it will absolutely die every time. This was quite frustrating. Monkey Wrench Mike and I pulled off to a shaded area because it was hot. It was really hot out there. We pull off, we find some shade, and we pull the dipstick out, and I took a whiff of it. It didn't smell good, guys. It smelled very burnt. And this is the part that's confusing to me. And we're getting to what Monster Transmission said here in a minute. When I pulled off, the first thing I did was check the fluid. And it smelled burnt. And it had not smelled burnt before. So I'm really confused. And trans temps were always good on this car. We had a big radiator. It had a big trans cooler. I mean, I was livid. I was livid because I was literally left in the middle of nowhere with no way of getting back. And I still, thanks to Monkey Wrench Mike's help, even with a broken car, Monkey Wrench Mike and I made it to 3 out of the 5 events that year with a U-Haul truck and a U-Haul trailer. We still managed, with all the chaos, we still managed to hit the majority of the events. I was determined we were going to finish Power Tour. So, some of you got to come out and see the car on the trailer. That was humiliating and embarrassing. I talked to Monster Transmissions just the other day because I had forgotten about it. I sold the car, and it's one of those out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to ever think about that car again. And then it occurred to me the other day, I was like, whatever happened? Because they were supposed to send me a video, and we were supposed to do like a collab and figure out what happened to the transmission. And it just never happened. Well, I got a hold of them, and their guy over there, I'm not going to name him, I don't know if he wants to be named or not, but the guy over there that's handling the whole thing, he got a hold of me and he said that they had actually moved locations, which they're based out of Florida. But we got to talking about Two Guys Garage and this 66 Impala over here, and that's how we got, like, it was like, oh, wait a minute, because Two Guys Garage, at least used to, I don't know if they still do, but they used to get a lot of transmissions from Monster Transmissions. So we had a good conversation about it, and I was like, so what happened to this? And he said, let me dig through the archives, because they had done some video, they'd done some photos, but then they packed up and they switched locations, and they moved to another spot in Florida, and obviously an operation as big as Monster Transmissions is, that takes some time and a lot of resources. So that kind of got buried. Well, they managed to send me, unfortunately, I didn't get any video. I got a couple pictures. One of them's got the pan off. I think the valve body is removed off of it. But I mean, the pictures aren't really gonna, I'll throw them in here, but the pictures aren't gonna show you anything. It's not gonna do you guys any good. He said, let's set up a phone call for the following day. And they want to get their builder, the guy that actually built both of my transmissions, on the phone so that he can explain what they believe happened to the transmission. So next day comes, we get on a phone call, super cool guys, both of them, and the builder said that he believed what happened was that the torque converter burned up. And the reason the torque converter burned up, and this is one, it's kind of controversial, everybody's got their opinion on it. I'm going to be straight up with you. I'm not a transmission guy. I can take motors apart, I can put motors back together, but when it comes to transmissions, the inner workings of a transmission, I can replace a valve body. I can replace solenoids. I can do some basic stuff to a transmission, but I don't have an intricate understanding of how a transmission actually works. And the torque converter, I don't entirely understand how the torque converter operates either. So this is way outside of my lane. So they told me that they believe the torque converter burned up because when I first got the transmission, I did not, for the first 1,000, 1,500 miles or so, I did not use torque lockup. I didn't even install it. I literally had the kit for the lockup sitting on a shelf, and I waited kind of last minute to install it, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to use it. Now, before I started driving the car without the lockup installed, I did a lot of research online to see if this could damage my transmission. And everything that I read was like, nah, I drove mine 100,000 miles with no lockup and it's fine. Then there were other people that were like, yeah, it actually can burn up your transmission. So mostly what I found seemed to suggest that if you run without lockup, you're going to be okay. And that's what I did. And the transmission was fine. The whole thing is just so crazy to me because I drove all that way with no lockup and the trans was fine. But the transmission blew up after I had long installed the lockup converter, had been using the lockup converter, and that's when it decides to blow up. So they said that upon disassembly of the torque converter and the transmission, they found that the torque converter clutches were burned. There was a lot of heat going on in the torque converter. So they told me that they believe the torque converter failed on that car. And that's exactly what I believe too. From the very beginning, I said, I've experienced this many times before where the transmission seems like it's a manual and it won't disengage. You know what I mean? Like the torque converter is not allowing a disengagement between the engine and the transmission. And obviously if they stay together and your back wheels stop, poof, it dies. It has to die. There's no other choice. Which is why they sent me another torque converter, and I replaced the torque converter. And when we put the whole car back together again, it still did the exact same thing. The exact same thing that it did before. So they had to send me another transmission along with a third torque converter, and we redid it again. So when I asked them if it was the torque converter that was the problem, why did it have the exact same problem when I put a brand new torque converter back in it again? And the transmission builder explained, and this makes perfect sense to me. He explained that after the torque converter overheated, got hot, fragments, metal fragments, pieces of clutch material, whatever, start going through the system of the car, the transmission cooling system, you know, it ends up getting into the pump. And he said the pump did have a lot of scoring and scarring, like the pump shaft or whatever, and debris ended up getting into the pump, ended up causing a whole world of problems. So it was kind of the initial failure would be the torque converter failed, and the reason is because I did not install lockup on the torque converter. And then from the torque converter failing, it caused damage to the pump on the transmission from debris getting into it. Now again, I want to make it clear, like I'm not a transmission expert, so I'm relying on what they're telling me. I believe that what they're telling me is true. Let's make that very clear too. I'm not questioning them at all. Monster Transmissions was one of my big sponsors, man. 2024 was a huge year for sponsors because a lot of people came together to make my dream for this car come true. I love the 80s Monte Carlos, man. Slick cars that actually have a true SS, and to be able to build it the way I want with the help from some really big names. Not everybody gets those kind of bragging rights, man. Like I got a sponsorship with Holly. That's a big name. Monster Transmissions. It's a big name. Smitting Performance. Like some really big names went into the build of that car. I am so proud of everything that we were all able to do together. It's just a shame that the car ended up blowing up. And I was honestly hoping that they were going to come back and say it was some kind of a defect, workmanship defect problem on their end. I was hoping for that because the last thing I wanted was to be the one responsible for the transmission blowing up. But apparently I was, because I did not run torque lockup. So apparently if you do not have your torque lockup engaged when you're cruising around driving, since it never goes into that, it's like an overdrive. I guess it's overdrive. It's like an overdrive. You know, it drops the RPMs down 3, maybe 500 RPM, depending on how fast you're going. So, I mean, it makes a difference, but to me, it didn't seem like it was a huge difference. But apparently, when you're at speed and everything and you don't have that lockup engaged, it doesn't dump enough fluid or something into the transmission for cooling, and it causes it to actually just overheat with time. And the longer you drive that way, like the hotter the fluid gets, the more damage gets done to the torque converter, the transmit. Just, you know, heat is the main killer in fact, heat is like the #1 killer of all transmissions, period. So I'm going to let you guys do what you do and drop your comments below and tell me what your thoughts are. Maybe some of you are transmission builders, and hopefully you can learn from my mistake. At the end of the day, that's the big takeaway from this, from me to you, is I made a mistake that was, honestly, it was so simple. Installing that lockup switch it didn't take more than 30 minutes, guys. There's a pressure switch you throw onto the third gear, like pressure port, a couple wires, and a switch. I mean, that's literally like all there is to it. I blew up a $6,000 transmission over like a $30 switch. And truthfully, it's embarrassing. That's really embarrassing. Such a minor oversight on my part caused such damage to a $6,000 transmission. So I want to give a big shout out to Monster Transmissions for, number one, getting back with me and getting this whole thing resolved. I'm glad that we've got it squashed. It's under the bus now, water under the bridge, whatever. And we can move on from it. They said that they're still interested in working with me in the future. If I have any projects, you know, they'd be happy to work with me again. So that's really cool of them. So again, big shout out and thank you to Monster, not just for sponsoring the first transmission and torque converter, but also, remember, they gave me a second one. That's 2 transmissions that was $6,000 a piece. They literally gave me 12 G's in transmissions, guys. That's a lot of faith. And although I was really pissed off at first, I was so angry. You know, cooler heads always prevail. So remember that. I'm still upset that it happened, but I'm even more upset with myself. I could have just installed that switch and the transmission should have been fine. But instead, I wanted to just get to driving the car, worry about the lockup later because I didn't think it was important. And ultimately, something so small was able to destroy something so big. That's a shame. That's a shame. But it is what it is. The Monte Carlo is sold. It's down the road. And the new owner told me he doesn't really drive it. In fact, he said he was thinking about selling it. So if I can remember in this video, if you might be interested in the Monte Carlo, I'll see if I can find a link to maybe his Instagram. I think is probably the best place. That's where he seems to post pictures. He's done some changes to it. He's made some changes, but I think he said he was looking to sell it. And he said the transmission in that car is still going strong. So apparently all is right with the world again. I got to get out of here because I actually have to get to work on the 66 Impala and make a video for you guys. So listen, thank you again to Monster Transmissions, and thank you again to all the people that came together to make that Monte Carlo happen. You know, Santa's Workshop, we had Delbert Art out here, Monkey Wrench Mike, of course, and Smedding Performance, and Monster Transmissions, Holly. I mean, we had a lot of people and a lot of hands and some pretty big companies working together to make that car a reality. It's just a shame it didn't work out better, but I'm hopeful you guys are going to want to come out and see Monkey Wrench Mike and I on Power Tour this year, 2025, June, I don't remember. You guys can look it up. Just look up Hot Rod Power Tour dates and you'll see. This year, we're going to be in the 57 Chevy, which is right here, so you'll know exactly what to look for. And I'm hopeful by the time we get to Power Tour, this gap will be fixed because the radiator actually sticks up too far. But we're going to be in platinum parking this year. I keep forgetting about that damn air cleaner. That is not the air cleaner I want to use for this. We still have to get air conditioning installed in this car, which is provided by Vintage Air. Cold case for the cooling system. We got CVF Racing for the front mount setup that we got here. Absolutely beautiful. Not much room though. She's a tight fit in here, guys. But damn, does that not look good? I mean, she looks really, really good. Hoping we can take it down to Mako, and that'll be that body shop channel. Maybe we can get a fresh paint job on it. The paint is beautiful. It's a beautiful paint job, but there is some cracking starting to happen in some places. And I really want this thing to look its best. It is going to be in the platinum parking. So come out to Power Tour this year and find us. It's going to start in Indianapolis, Indiana. Then it's going to be somewhere in Illinois, I think. And then it's going to like Ohio. And if you're in any of those areas, definitely go to the Power Tour website. I'll put a link down below. You can check it. It'll give you the dates and everything. And Monkey Wrench Mike and I will be out there in this car this year. And then if all goes well, I haven't even got this car running. You know what I mean? This car turned out to be a disaster. Turned out to be a flood car, and it wasn't listed as a flood car. I had no idea this was a flood car, but it is. And nothing works and it doesn't run. Everything is broken, and this car was on television, which is super cool. This car was on Two Guys Garage, season 12, many, 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 many years ago, and then somehow it got abandoned in a barn again, and we're back to not running on top of it being flooded in a hurricane, apparently. So 427 big block, great motor, man. This thing's got a great power plant, 400 transmission. Once I get her going, assuming she runs, this could be a seriously mean car for Power Tour, guys. But anyway, I just wanted to give you a quick update on the Monte Carlo, and of course, Power Tour 2025, which is coming very soon. So do me a favor, if you enjoyed today's video, hit the thumbs up button and let me know. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. And until next time, stay safe out there, everybody. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon in the next one.